The chill of autumn swept across the French countryside as engines rumbled and soldiers stood ready. Dust and anticipation hung in the air when General George S. Patton Jr. arrived, ivory-handled pistols gleaming at his sides. These men, members of the 761st Tank Battalion, had been told their whole lives they were second-class material. Before the war, black soldiers were pushed into kitchens and labor units, rarely trusted with a rifle, never trusted with a tank. Even Patton himself once claimed a colored soldier could not think fast enough to fight in armor. But by year 1944, the US Army had no choice but to send them into battle. And so, on that October morning in France, Patton climbed onto the hood of a Jeep, looked those men in the eye, and thundered words that would burn into history. Words that challenged every insult they had endured and called them to prove the world wrong. You are the first Negro tankers to ever fight in the American Army. I don't care what color you are, so long as you go up there and kill the Kraut. Everyone has their eyes on you, and most of all, your race is looking forward to your success. Don't let them down, and damn you, don't let me down. With those words, the 761st Tank Battalion, Patton's Panthers, rolled into history. From the swamps of Louisiana, where they trained under segregation, to the bloody fields of Metz, where Colonel Bates fell, from Sergeant Sam Turley's last stand with a machine gun in the snow, to Sergeant Reuben Rivers refusing evacuation after his leg was torn apart, the Panthers fought with a ferocity no one expected. They smashed through Giebling, held the line in the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge, and captured Tilley against all odds, while Axis Sally mocked them on the radio. They pushed through the Siegfried Line, crossed the Rhine, and were among the first to see the horrors of Nazi concentration camps. For 183 days of continuous combat, they fought in 6 countries, destroyed tanks, captured towns, and proved that courage has no color. By the war's end, they had inflicted over 130,000 casualties on the enemy, earned hundreds of medals, and secured their place in history, even as racism still shadowed their service. On Victory in Europe Day, the Panthers saluted Patton once more. This time, the general returned the salute quietly, knowing they had given him exactly what he demanded, the best. This is the story of the men who carried not only the weight of war, but also the burden of proving their very worth as soldiers. Patton's Panthers, the 761st Tank Battalion. Before the war, the US military saw black soldiers as little more than laborers, cooks, truck drivers, orderlies. In 1941, only 5 black officers wore the uniform, 3 of them chaplains. Racist commanders openly called them second-class material, unfit for combat. Even Patton himself once wrote to his wife, "A colored soldier cannot think fast enough to fight in armor." And yet, the Selective Training and Service Act of year 1940 outlawed racial discrimination. A hollow promise as segregation persisted. All black units were formed under white officers, assumed to be safe since few believed they would ever see battle. Among them was the 761st, activated at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana, in April year 1942. Under Major Paul Bates, a man who trained side by side with his men in swamps, mud, and Louisiana rain, the battalion built pride and unity. Still, doubt haunted them. "We ain't gonna see nothing but rattlesnakes in Louisiana until this war is over," Private L.C. Byrd muttered. Segregation cut deep. They were forced to the back of buses, sometimes at gunpoint. They trained for over 2 years, yet many still believed they'd never fight. For over 2 long years, the 761st trained in the swamps of Louisiana and the heat of Texas, always wondering if their time would come. Many believed the Army would never allow them to fight, that their tanks would rust before they ever saw battle. But in June, year 1944, just 3 days after Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, the Panthers finally received their orders. The war needed men. The war needed tankers. And whether the Army wanted it or not, these men would fight. On the 9th of June, they rolled out, bound for New York. Families and friends waved goodbye from train platforms, knowing their sons and brothers were heading into history and into danger. In September, the battalion boarded the British troop transport Esperance Bay and crossed the Atlantic. Their Shermans chained below deck, the men crowded together in tight quarters. Every night, the thought of German U-boats haunted them, but the ship pressed on through gray, unforgiving seas. They landed in England on the 8th of September, year 1944, to a mixture of excitement and disbelief. For many of the Panthers, it was their first time beyond America, their first time treated as equals by local civilians. In the pubs of small English towns, they could sit beside white soldiers without being forced to the back. It was a taste of freedom they had never known at home. Initially, the 761st was assigned to the 9th Army, but fate had bigger plans. On the 2nd of October, orders arrived. They were being transferred to General George S. Patton's 3rd Army. The legendary commander had demanded more tanks to fuel his relentless drive across Europe. When the War Department reminded him that the only available unit was black, he snapped. "Who the hell asked for color? I asked for tankers." By mid-October, the Panthers were fully armed and ready for war. The battalion numbered over 800 men, carrying 54 M4 Sherman tanks, each a 35-ton beast powered by a roaring V8 engine, armed with a 75mm cannon, machine guns, and raw determination. Their shoulder patches bore the image of a snarling Black Panther with the motto, "Come out fighting." It was more than an emblem, it was a promise. On the 20th of October, year 1944, they landed in Normandy, the very ground where thousands of Allied troops had died just months before. The beaches were still littered with wreckage. The air still smelled faintly of smoke and salt. From there, they thundered 400 miles across France in just 6 days, a breathless dash to catch up with Patton's spearhead at the town of Nicolas-de-Port. Along the way, they saw the devastation of war firsthand: shattered villages, burned out vehicles, and the silent graves of those who had gone before them. At last, they rolled into camp, mud-splattered, exhausted, but alive with anticipation. Their moment had come. The world doubted them, the army doubted them, but under Patton, there would be no excuses. Soon, the 761st would get the chance to prove themselves, not only as soldiers, but as Americans. Dawn broke with the scream of German 88 seconds. Artillery fire rained across the fields near Metz. The Panthers surged forward alongside the 26th Infantry Division. Shells lit the sky. Smoke and snow mixed into chaos. On the very first day, their beloved commander, Colonel Paul Bates, was cut down by machine gun fire. The man who had built their pride lay wounded. His replacement, Major Wingo, cracked under fire, fleeing the battlefield. For a moment, the battalion stood leaderless, but the Panthers pressed on. First Sergeant Sam Turley climbed from his blazing tank, running through the ditch where wounded men were trapped. Ammo belts across his shoulders, a .50 caliber gun in hand, he fired until German shells tore him apart, his finger frozen to the trigger as he fell. And then there was Sergeant Reuben Rivers. Wounded by a mine that shredded his leg, he refused evacuation. "Captain, you're gonna need me. We got a job to do." Days later, despite worsening gangrene, he led his men through Gebling, destroying tanks, killing hundreds, and buying precious time before finally being killed in his Sherman. His valor would earn him the Medal of Honor posthumously. When Hitler unleashed his last gamble in the Ardennes, the Panthers were called north. The Battle of the Bulge was on, and Bastogne was besieged. Through snow and bitter resistance, the 761st fought toward Tillet. Captain David Williams told his men grimly, "If the Germans attack, we can't hold them. Do you want me to wave my underwear, or do you want to fight it out?" The vote was unanimous: they would fight. Even as Axis Sally's propaganda taunted them on the radio, "Good morning, Negro soldiers of the 761st. Our fight is not with you." The Panthers pressed forward. For 3 days, they clawed through enemy fortifications, woods, and snow. Captain Charles "Pop" Gates led a 10-tank assault that finally broke German lines. Tillet fell on the 7th of January, year 1945. A captured German asked Sergeant Johnny Holmes in disbelief, "What are you doing here? This is a white man's war." Holmes handed him a cigarette and replied, "You ain't got no black or white when the nation is in trouble. you only got Americans. From the Siegfried Line to the Rhine, Patton's Panthers smashed through fortifications, pillboxes, and machine gun nests. In March, they crossed the Great River, crushing enemy columns, destroying thousands of Germans, and capturing towns across the Reichland. And then came the horrors no one expected. The 761st stumbled upon a Nazi labor camp. The barbed wire, the skeletal prisoners, the smell of death, it left them stunned, forever changed. By April, Mussolini was dead. Hitler had killed himself in Berlin. On May 5, year 1945, the Panthers reached Steyr, Austria. Over 100,000 Germans surrendered as the war came to its end. For 183 consecutive days, the 760 first fought in 6 countries, attached to 3 armies and 7 divisions. They inflicted over 130,000 enemy casualties, captured towns, and destroyed fortifications. They paid dearly. 3 officers and 31 enlisted men killed, over 200 wounded. Yet they earned 391 decorations: Silver Stars, Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts. In 1998, long after the guns fell silent, the battalion finally received the Presidential Unit Citation it had always deserved. On Victory in Europe Day, Patton himself stood tall in a jeep as the Panthers saluted. He returned it, quietly satisfied. He had asked for the best tankers, and he had gotten them. The 761st Tank Battalion shattered both Nazi defenses and the poisonous myth of black inferiority. They fought not just the Germans, but racism within their own army. In mud, blood, and fire, they proved that courage knows no color. The men of the 761st were not just fighting Nazis, they were fighting centuries of doubt, prejudice, and the weight of a nation that had told them they were less. Yet when the smoke cleared, it was not the color of their skin that mattered, but the steel in their hearts. They endured 183 days of hell, from Metz to the Bulge, from the Siegfried Line to the gates of the camps, and in doing so, they silenced every voice that had ever called them unworthy. Patton had told them, "Everyone has their eyes on you," and indeed, the world was watching. The Panthers proved that courage has no color, that sacrifice knows no boundaries, and that true patriotism is not measured by words, but by action on the battlefield. So the next time you hear of the great victories of World War II, remember the Panthers. Remember the men who carried both the American flag and the burden of proving their very right to carry it. They came out fighting, and they never stopped. Would you have had the strength to keep going, not just against the enemy in front of you, but against the prejudice standing behind you?